9/11 occurred and I was in Medina and I saw the Twin Towers fall in Medina. And that was a changing point for me when I realized, hey, that's my country. I need to go back and explain to my people that my faith is not a terroristic faith. Until our immature Muslims understand they can separate between the role of a Muslim politician versus the role of a sheikh. A Muslim politician is going to say things I don't like. Let me refute him and still understand he has a role to play. But just understand the other groups are not your enemies and they're not evil and they're not callers to shaitan and they're not all going to Jahannam just because they disagree with your particular understanding of Islam. If we could get to that level, I really think the ummah would actually be at a far bigger place.
All right, Assalamu alaikum, Shaykh. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's just jump into it for the sake of time. So to begin, obviously the talk for all the Muslimin, rightfully so, is Gaza, Palestine, and what's going on. Very recently, some recent developments is the ICJ has said it's plausible, this is old news now, it's plausible that Israel's committing genocide in Gaza. The prosecutor of the ICC, the International Criminal Court, has issued an application for arrest warrants against Netanyahu and some other members in the government in Israel. These are very, very big steps. Alongside those big steps are multiple countries who have recognized Palestine as a state. And these are huge steps that we have not seen, that we dreamt of seeing for a very, very long time. So with all of these developments, and as things stand now, what is your overall stance with the situation and where do you see it possibly going?
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam wa rasulullah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa wala ma ba'd. First and foremost, the general disclaimer is that obviously I am not a political analyst. That's not my training. And so we all have the right to say our opinions. But with that disclaimer, I like to always differentiate between that which I have studied intensely, in which my opinion is, I would say, a bit more of an expert and formulated, versus something that I'm a generic reader of, in which case my opinion should be just as much as any other educated person. And that's the disclaimer I'd like to make. With regards to this issue of how I see what is unfolding, in my humble opinion, when 20, 30 years ago, there was this famous theory of the clash of civilizations where Samuel Huntington, who was one of the world's foremost political scientists, of one strand of political scientists of the world at the time, formulated that the Western world and the Eastern world, and in particular the Muslim world, would have this massive clash, and 9/11 happened. And so Huntington's theory of the clash of civilization was then earmarked as being basically a precursor to this massive fundamentalist on one side, i.e. the Muslims, versus the rationalists. That was the perception that was given. At the time, myself and others, we actually pointed out, not exactly at the time, but after 9/11, I was one of those that said, actually, what we're seeing now is not a clash of civilizations, but a clash within civilization.
I see.
A clash of what it means to be a Western, secular, liberal, democratic society. And that is a clash that we're seeing over and over and over again around the world. Between, go back a few years, Bernie Sanders on one side and Trump on the other. The divide between Bernie Sanders and Trump is as marked as the divide between East and West. And yet both of them are claiming to be bastions of what it means to be American and Western. And so in reality, what we're seeing here is a clash within Western civilization, right? Is it really going to stand up to its own ideals? Or is it all a sham? Is it all hypocrisy, right? That's what we are seeing here. And that clash, the sad fact of the matter, and sometimes I say things get me into trouble, but I'm just being blunt here. We Muslims statistically, I'm just saying statistically, we are not significant enough in the Western world to play a vital role in terms of our percentages. Now, sometimes percentages are catalysts, and sometimes those catalysts, even in small percentages, can act as massive changes. And that's what I'm going to come to. However, fact of the matter, especially in America, we are less than 1%. We are less than 1% of this country. And so this massive clash taking place in our country and Canada, you guys have better statistics than we do in terms of percentages, but your immigrant Muslim community is newer, and so they're less integrated in the infrastructure. So there's positives and negatives either way. My point is that what we're seeing now is that a number of Western countries, Norway and Ireland and Spain and others, they're actually, at least their governments, they are, and especially Ireland, because Ireland's been through the underdog. Ireland's been mistreated and manhandled, and the subjugations upon the Irish people by the British Empire and South Africa. Why do you think South Africa and Ireland in particular are so sympathetic to the plight of Palestine? Because they've been there, done that. And when they see that happening, they cannot help but feel a sense of, hey, now that we've made it through, the least we can do is help those that are going through similar or even worse. And so, in my humble opinion, this is a very optimistic change. And once again, it bodes well for the future. At the same time, I'm also tempered by the reality that none of the major superpowers have yet, switched sides. And so we're still, it is an ongoing battle. And inshallah, even though our percentages are small, like I said, catalysts typically are not required in massive percentages. And, I'm a chemical engineer, my first training. And so, catalyst is sometimes a few drops in a many gallons of fluid, and it might have the desired impact. And so perhaps we as Muslims can act as catalysts, but in the end of the day, we cannot be the significant force in and of itself. We're going to have to tap into the grander, scale of things and be involved with our communities. And I'm going from point to point here, but one point I would like to bring up is that one of the biggest positives of Gaza and Palestine is that it has forced us to mature up about our discourse. Yeah. It has forced the Muslim community, and I have been very, very vocal in the last 8-9 months about this reality. It's forced us to have very awkward conversations and express a level of foresight and planning that we weren't able to do. A lot of things have come into the forefront here, but we can talk about them in our conversation. But overall, Islam teaches us to be optimistic. And the last 8-9 months have also shown us that, inshallah, things are optimistic.
Inshallah, inshallah. There have been some major countries, like, for example, France, I believe France, but for sure Germany, they have said, and I was shocked about Germany, that we're willing to comply with any ruling the ICC.
Yes, even France has said this in Germany. It's surprising because Germany, maybe it's making up for its own, Nazi past, but Germany was extremely anti-Palestine for so many years. But I think there is a overall sense that the International Court of Justice does represent a neutral body that is the highest level of the UN. And so there is a level of respect that those countries are giving. Unfortunately, as you know, our own country in its arrogance, and perhaps in that arrogance will be a downfall. And I know I don't say that positively. I'd rather our country change its course because a downfall doesn't bode well for any of us. But in the end of the day, Allah knows the future.
Yeah, Allahu alam. Jazakallah khair. So you gave a lecture once, and I was very inspired throughout it, where you had mentioned that every single time that Islam was almost on like the brink of defeat, or the Muslims were on the brink of defeat, some group of Muslims from some faraway land that no one's ever heard of, you can't even find it on a map, come and just defeat the enemies and kind of reestablish Islam over and over again. And you went through so many examples. I was like, which one's going to be the last one? Like, they just went on forever. SubhanAllah.
Yeah. I actually, I'm going to jump the gun here. I actually believe, I'm very optimistic that the Muslims of the West will have, I'm not going to say the crucial role, Allah knows, but a crucial role without a doubt. That's my humble opinion. Yeah. The Muslims of the West have a very unique role to play. Yeah. And there are many reasons for this. Of them is that it's our countries that are aiding and abetting the genocide. And here we are, these are our countries. And again, the level of maturity, because again, when I was growing up, and I was like the first generation born here, right? I was born in the 70s, of the first generation here. We had a very different, our parents kept on driving the point that you're never going to be an American. This is not your home. That's what we were taught. Not just our parents, our shuyukh, our scholars. It was always like, this is Darul Kufr, and that's not yours, and this and that. And growing up in this cognitive dissonance, in my humble opinion, it actually, you guys are too young to remember, but 20 years ago, when the radical groups Al-Qaeda and ISIS came along, unfortunately, there was this tendency among some to actually sympathize with crazy radicals, and they're no longer around anymore, but there was a sympathy. And one of the reasons was the message that was given to our generation was, you don't belong here. Mm-hmm. That message was given by both our shuyukh and elders and by the far right. And so when you're being told by both sides you don't belong here, then this radical messianic apocalyptic group comes along, and you're naive enough to actually believe them, not see theirs, but they're literally a bunch of prison thugs, literally prison thugs that have just taken the banner of jihad overnight, right? You can't see that. Then you just realize, well, you think that that's my future, so you just go and join them. But see, that discourse is gone, and your generation has grown up hearing a very, very different narrative. And I'd like to think, inshallah, our generation played a little bit of role, because, we are your predecessors in that regard, where we changed that tone. Speaking about myself, 9/11 occurred and I was in Medina, and I saw the Twin Towers fall in Medina. And that was a changing point for me when I realized, hey, that's my country. I need to go back and explain to my people that my faith is not a terroristic faith. I literally had an epiphany, a change of heart because of 9/11, that I need to come back and start preaching in fluent English, because I speak English better than any other language. This is my people, my language, my civilization and culture. And I understand how best to communicate my faith to my people, right? And so I claimed my birth heritage, even though before that point in time, I was myself ambivalent, because that's what I've been taught. My whole life, you've been taught, this is Darul Kufr. Again, this is a deeper pointer, but, modern issues sometimes require a little bit of fine tuning, of past traditions. There was never a notion of citizenship in the past. Yeah. And so people identify with their faith. And so our scholars of the third, fourth, fifth generation, not the Quran, not the Sunnah, our scholars divided the world into Darul Islam and Darul Kufr, right? That simplistic distinction, with all that the repercussions that come with it, don't necessarily apply in 2024, right?
And that those definitions kind of change over
those
time.
Those definitions change over time, exactly. Because what exactly is Canada? How exactly would you define it, where Muslims have the right to be who they are? What exactly is, Australia or these lands where, Norway 10% or Austria 10% Muslim, France is 15-20% Muslim? How do you define these lands? Maybe you need a new definition. It's not Darul Islam, but the repercussions of calling it Darul Kufr also don't apply. And so there's a new discourse that happens, and what we've been saying, I've been saying for the last 25 years, is that, hey, this is your land. It's your country. Be angry that it's involved in genocide, and then make a difference.
I see.
It's your country. Claim ownership. Don't just sit there and moan and groan and lambast. No, go and get active. Start protesting. Start changing, the narrative. Start making people understand what's going on, and start pushing people to take ownership of what our own country is doing in that land. And where there's a will, there's a way. The past has shown that groups of committed and dedicated citizens can change the course of history. That's every single major shift that occurred, whether good or bad, whether it's the civil rights, right? Whether it's feminist movement, whether it's abortion, whether it's sexuality and gender, whether it's LGBT, whether it's the Vietnam War. Some of these were good in our eyes, some of these are bad, meaning, the discourse. But in every single one of these, mass protests, demonstrations, the temperament of the people shifts, and the government has to follow suit. Yeah. Why can't we learn from history and claim what is ours? And especially, you guys are from Canada, especially in Canada, you guys have far more potential than we do, simply because your percentages are far higher. Mississauga is 15% Muslim.
15?
15.
That's crazy. I'm actually from Mississauga.
15% Muslim. Unfortunately, the majority of them were still arguing over the length of your beard and the size of your trousers, literally. And they think that is the major point of the religion. And that's the mindset we have to challenge, right? They think this is what you have to, what exactly is the specific aqidah question goes back 1,000 years. That's what they're obsessed with, right? And because of that, they're going to put you in a box. Because of that, they won't pray behind you, call you a mubtadi', kafir, zindiq, whatever it might be. Complicated process here. Yeah. We have to be empathetic. It's not really their fault. That's what they're taught. Yeah. But imagine the potential if we can tap into 15% of Mississauga. Yeah. Yeah. Imagine the potential of 10% of Toronto. Imagine the potential of that. We don't have those statistics in America, right? And your country, because it's a newer country, and because it's a more than 50% of the people in Toronto are born outside of Canada. 50% of Toronto. So you are an immigrant country. And your last government demonstrated and showcased this when they had their ministers. So if the Muslims were mature enough to understand that, hey, it's our country, we can shape our policies. It's not an us versus them. Yeah. It's your country, right? Yeah. Take ownership of it. And this will require a level of maturity, because in order to get involved in the system, obviously, You're not going to enforce the Sharia because Canada is not Sharia. America is not going to be Darul Islam and Sharia. So what level of compromise, how are you going to navigate? That's a very difficult question. And once again, we have the simplistic hardliners, are the black or white. And, if you remember 5 years ago, 8 years ago, I was one of those that was not throwing Muslim politicians who were still sympathetic to Muslim civilizational power. I wasn't throwing them under the bus, even if morally I was opposed to them, because I understood that a politician and a sheikh don't have the same role, right? And this is a very difficult thing to say. Now we see, at least in America, our Muslim politicians, I strongly, strongly disagree with their stances on morality. And I said this publicly and in khutbahs. Still, they stood up against AIPAC. And they stood up in Congress multiple times, saying things that nobody else said, right? And we needed them in Congress to say that. Until our immature Muslims understand, they can separate between the role of a Muslim politician versus the role of a sheikh. A Muslim politician is going to say things I don't like. Let me refute him and still understand he has a role to play, right? That level of maturity that we need to come to. Unfortunately, we still don't have it yet. But what happens with the Palestine crisis, the Gaza crisis, alhamdulillah, a lot of people have had to learn really quick, super fast. A lot of people that have steep learning curve. And so I'm very happy at this. I'm going to continue saying this. I was one of those very harsh against the intrasectarian disputes. I despise the pettiness that, unfortunately, too many Muslims display. And sometimes I'm a bit too harsh because I need to also calm down in this, but I'm angry at the shuyukh. They should know better. I'm angry that you're still debating, the most petty issues of fiqh and aqidah when there's a massacre taking place, when there's a genocide taking place, and you're dividing the 5% religious Muslims, right, over how do you interpret istawa ala al-arsh, how do you interpret yadullah, how do you interpret this aspect of qadr, and you're going to, bring up 1,000-year-old controversy that is completely lost on the masses when children are being bombed. And because of that, you're going to have, hatred in your heart against other Muslims. So again, I have to be mature about this and be blunt about this. And Gaza is acting like a catalyst to separate people that are thinking 10 steps ahead versus those that are still going backwards. Intrasectarian, politics, identity, all of these conversations, Gaza has forced it on us. And for that, I'm very grateful.
Yeah, may Allah bless your message. Honestly, I think that was very beautifully said. And it points in a very important direction that as Muslims, we have to be practical.
The Sharia requires us. Here's another point. The word practical, of course, there are aspects that we have to be careful about. Practical doesn't mean, it's difficult to pray Fajr, I'm not going to pray Fajr. And this is where the critics, come up, because for them, the word practical, it makes them cringe. But the Sharia is meant to be ease. This isn't me speaking. This is the Quran and the Sunnah and the Seerah. يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ بِكُمُ الْيُسْرَ. Literally, Allah says, I want ease for you. وَمَا جَعَلَ عَلَيْكُمْ فِي الدِّينِ مِنْ حَرَجٍ. I did not make this religion difficult for you. And the Prophet said, يَسِّرُوا وَلَا تُعَسِّرُوا بَشِّرُوا وَلَا تُنَفِّرُوا, right? And the Prophet made dua for the one who, he prayed for the one who made takhfif of the salah. He got angry at the one who made the salah long, right? So the Sharia has come to make life reasonable within parameters of haram and halal. And therefore, yes, the Sharia has come to be pragmatic. And Ibn al-Qayyim and others clearly mention this, that when there's a hukum, when there's a ruling that is not going to make life conducive, then you have misunderstood the Islamic ruling. The Islamic ruling is not going to make life impossible. And those people that used to tell us that you cannot be involved in the system, you cannot be involved in politics, you cannot even vote, because that was the fatwa I grew up hearing constantly in the 80s, right? And there was like no second opinion amongst the clergy of that time. Voting is haram. Voting is shirk. Voting is kufr. That was the only thing we heard. And again, after 9/11, all of that was kicked out because they understood you needed to be involved in the system, or else our masajid were getting shut down, our Islamic schools, so many institutes, shuyukh were deported, some were thrown in jail, all unjustly. All unjustly. And they realized, hey, we need to fight the system. This isn't fair what's happening. How are you going to fight the system? You're going to have to use the system, right? And so, again, you guys are too young to remember this, but 9/11, it was a wake-up call for me. I mean, I'm Exhibit A. I was 22, 23, right, when 9/11 happened, right? No, sorry, a bit older than the 25, I think. 25, 26, yeah. So 9/11 happened, and I was in my mid-20s, right? And I, at the time, did have very naive views, simplistic views. So I kind of empathize when a new generation of 20-year-olds coming And they want to just, in their simplistic mind, say anybody who doesn't agree with my understanding of Islam must be a CIA agent, must be a sellout, must be Iran, must be a liberal reformist of Islam. I kind of get it because I used to feel that way. But the difference is we've lived through tragedy after tragedy.
Yeah.
Whereas when I was 20, there was no tragedy I lived through, right?
Yeah.
We lived in a very different world. And what I don't understand, you've seen this reality that, look, you cannot live in this utopic bubble. You cannot live in this environment where you think it's like a laboratory environment where everything is pristine and pure. It doesn't work that way. We are navigating through a very, very difficult system.
Yeah.
And there's no clear-cut right and wrong. There's no like simplistic, haqq versus batil. There are areas of shades of gray everywhere in the middle. And we're having to choose the lesser of two evils in almost everything that we do.
I see.
So this is where the pragmatism comes in this regard. And yes, we're going to make some mistakes. There's no doubt about it. How can we not make mistakes when we're going where no other generation has gone?
Yeah.
When we're doing what nobody before us has done. But rather than the armchair critics just lambast and point and pinpoint and make fun of and refute, learn from the mistakes. Do it again, bigger, better, stronger, and more perfect.
Yeah.
I always tell my critics, I always tell them, rather than just criticize, do something bigger and better, and I'll make dua for you.
Oh, that's profound. May Allah bless you immensely. So it seems like there's some kind of balance where we have to be practical and pragmatic and have a kind of a conclusion we want to get to, a result we want to have as Muslims, without compromising certain Islamic values. Would you agree with that generally?
Of course. And the problem comes, though, defining.
I was just about to ask that.
The problem comes defining it is almost impossible because it is context-based.
Yeah.
It's context-based. It varies from situation to situation. And that's why, for example, the most obvious example, which is like no controversy at all. The Prophet ﷺ said, when you pray standing. If you cannot, then pray sitting. If you cannot, then pray lying down. So from this, our scholars have basically given that ruling that, look, the more difficult a situation is, the more laxity the Sharia gives you in that situation. Okay, this is a maxim, a qaida in fiqh. The more difficult life is, the easier the Sharia is.
I hope you guys are enjoying the show so far. And if you are, then remember to like, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, click the link down below to see how you can support us in our mission. High value guests, high value studios, they all cost a lot. And we were blessed with the privilege and the honor of sitting with Dr. Yasir Qadhi today to have this very important discussion. But obviously, flying out to Dallas, Texas is not exactly cheap. So if you guys want to see more of these high value productions, remember to like, comment, subscribe, and again, support the cause using the link down below. Now let's get back to the show. I see.
Okay, so if you can stand up and pray, stand up. If you're sick, you can sit down, sit down. If you cannot, then lie down and at least try to move your head. If you cannot even do that, then what? You move your eyelashes, right? You blink. If you cannot even do that, our scholars say if you're literally paralyzed, you literally imagine salah.
Wow.
Literally. So this is exactly, take this, copy and paste from the hadith and apply it to the real world now, right? You can't predict how bad the situation will get. May Allah protect all of us. Look at the Uyghurs of China.
Yeah.
May Allah protect any of us to be in that situation. And may Allah bless them and free them. Can you imagine being in a Uyghur concentration camp right now? What fatwas are we going to give them about siyam? About salah? They can't pray.
Yeah.
They're going to be whipped if they pray. They are brought out in the daytime of Ramadan and forced to drink alcohol in public so that they know they're not fasting. What fatwa are you going to give them? You're going to say to them, you're going to have to say to, may Allah protect, if I were there, say, look, when they force you, you do it, and your fast isn't broken. I would give them, if I were to be there, I would say to them, you will fast in your mind. And because you're forced, when they force you, that is actually ignored and your fast is not broken.
Wow.
Now, is that fatwa I can give in America? If somebody says, oh, I have to go out for a lunch and I don't want to be awkward. You can't, I don't want to be awkward by pretending to be fasting. I don't want to give away that I'm a Muslim. Is that two the same?
Not at all.
Exactly. So my point is a lot of these, people who don't understand fiqh and usul, simplistic minded critics, they think the Uyghur situation and the situation of the person in barrister America is exactly the same.
Yeah.
No, it's not. Mm-hmm. And in some areas, we are not to the level of the Uyghurs, but we're closer to that, i.e. politics is one of those. What do we do? It's our government. I have the right to get somebody in office. I have that. I can run for office if I wanted to, right? I have Muslims that are running and they're saying to me, we're going to help the Palestinian situation. Now, in order to get there, they're going to have to choose their battles. They can't be Mr. Maulana Imam Mufti Shaykhul Islam. They're going to have to preach a rhetoric that I don't agree with ethically, morally, about equal rights for same sex and this and that, right? Now, what do I do now? What exactly is the end result? And this is where, again, the simplistic minded people, they think the awkward situation of the lunch versus the Uyghurs is exactly the same. No, I have to save 45,000 people that are being massacred. And not just that, overall, the Palestinian situation, it's not just one episode of Gaza, 75 years have gone by, right? And not just this, it's more than just the Palestinians. It's the fact that our government should be representative of who we are.
Yeah.
We need to have people that are us, such that the next, may God protect us, a terrorist incident happens, people can say, hey, look, those are the bad guys, and the rest of us are all good guys. They need to be able to say that. Now, in order to get to that level, obviously, you're not going to have your Shaykhul Islam or Mufti going there, right? Yeah. Again, the level of intelligent discourse we need to get to that. I continue because I am optimist in the end of the day. If you continue to preach common sense and wisdom, eventually people are going to open up. That's what I've been doing for the last 10, 15 years. And alhamdulillah, I can say more and more people are opening up to this reality.
I see. So my question is, in regards to making political change within America, what is the best case scenario for that?
So I always say it's not my job to pontificate too much about political science. My job is simply to validate that people should get involved. That's all. I personally am a soft pragmatist. I have a much longer talk about on the Thinking Muslim podcast. You can listen to that, where I go over this in a lot more detail. And I talked about the fact that I'm a soft pragmatist. I'm not somebody who's a hard pragmatist. I don't believe that the bulk of the change will come via our elected officials. I don't believe this. But definitely, I also don't believe that we should avoid the system in totality. So overall, I am a soft endorser. Like, look, some people need to get involved. I personally would not want my children, my immediate family, my immediate students to get involved because it comes at a cost of your spirituality, right? But my saying to those who are concerned of spirituality, don't get involved, will have zero impact on the politicians who want to get involved, right?
I see.
So I'd much rather a Muslim politician who fears Allah a little bit get involved in office rather than a secular or somebody who doesn't fear Allah at all. Yeah. See my point here?
I see. That makes sense. Okay, so I want to bring the discussion for my own sake kind of to a basic point just for a moment. And kind of establish some like Islamic principles. Because I think it's important to be principled, especially for people watching at home, because a lot of us, including myself, are simple-minded, right? And I don't mean that as an insult. That's just a matter of fact for a lot of people, including myself. So I want to ask a few questions about Islamic principles. Do you believe that it is an obligation, when you're able to implement Islam as Allah has revealed it?
Of course, the generic answer is yes, but that question is being asked in a manner that it's what do you mean? Like, so yes, generically, of course, but how is that going to happen? And where are we right now? And what is the ideal you're aiming for? And how to get from point A to point B? Yeah. So this is where the devil is in the details. But you're asking a question, do you want to be Muslim? Of course I want to be Muslim. That's basically what you're asking. Do you want to apply Allah's Sharia? Of course you want to apply Allah's Sharia. Yeah. The answer to that is yes. There's no ambiguity there. Yeah. The devil comes in the details about what exactly does this implicate? What exactly are you getting at in every single issue?
I see. So let's say you had a scenario in which you let's say like the ideal Muslim scenario. So there's a group of Muslims who have the power and they will not be opposed by anyone to establish like the caliphate, for example. And they have one Amir al-Mu'mineen and the West is not going to get involved. They want to be hands off and let us basically do our own thing in our own country.
Good for them. Alhamdulillah. Excellent.
Yeah. So in that case, no problem. Alhamdulillah. No issue. Okay, alhamdulillah. So my question now is, let's take these two kind of positions, because right now there seems to be two mainstream positions. One is we need to work to fully implement that system. And whatever the reality is, we need to work to change the reality to make it acceptable to have such a system. Whereas the kind of train of thought that you're proposing, and please correct me if I'm wrong, seems to be, listen, that's not going to happen now. let's just focus on doing what we can to make the situation better. And there are certain ahkam that can be interpreted to fix the modern context instead of working to change the modern context to fit Islam.
Yes, I would overall agree with you there. I don't oppose those who want to establish an alternative system, but I simply point out, don't blame me if I think you're being impractical. That's my opinion.
I see.
Prove me wrong. I wish you all the best.
Yeah.
But the global system is here. People have tried. The Taliban tried in the 90s. ISIS tried. Al-Qaeda tried. You're going to go down that route? I don't know what to tell you. You're going to go down that route? Arab Spring, the whole Middle East tried.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Look what happened. So prove me wrong. But then, excuse me, before I say that, you're going to go down the ISIS route. I don't want you to go down that route.
Yeah. Of course.
I don't want you to go down that route because you harm my religion.
Yeah.
You did the most backward things. The most un-Islamic things in the name of Islam, thinking that Allah gave you the right to do that.
Yeah, and that's 100% off the table.
But then, so then, what's the alternative? You're gonna go down some island in the middle of nowhere and declare a caliphate?
No.
And even if you did, you got your 10 people. What's gonna happen?
There's no change that's going to happen.
So then, how exactly are you gonna do that?
Yeah.
Without revolution and blood, and with that revolution and blood, what does that entail?
Yeah.
That entails the governments that you're fighting against. They will kill you, your family, your friends, millions of people, because they're worried about the kursi. Look at Syria. Look at Egypt. Look at all of these countries. You want to do it all over again? My heart is with the people who stood up for the Arab Spring. That's what my heart is, right? But I saw the realities of what happened.
The results of it.
I saw the results of it. Do you understand what I mean here?
Absolutely.
My heart and my du'as were with the people on the streets.
Yeah.
I jumped for joy when the Arab Spring happened. But the bitter reality and the bitter pills that we saw.
Yeah.
Again, these Islamist movements and parties, they won resounding victories at the polls. But the world was against them. The superpowers, our country was against them.
Yeah.
And within weeks, they maneuvered and they performed the internal coup d'etats. So my critics call me naive. I'm sorry, I don't care. Look at the reality.
Yeah.
It's a two-way street here. I think you're naive. But hey, prove me wrong without bloodshed.
Yeah.
And if you want bloodshed, I don't want bloodshed.
Yeah.
For myself and my family. I don't want millions to die for this false dream. And also, superpowers are not carved out by calling somebody a khalifa. These are games you guys are playing. These are games. It doesn't, superpowers are based upon GDPs, armies, masses. China and America are superpowers because they have millions, hundreds of millions of people, and they have trillions of dollars of GDP and economy. That's how you become a superpower. And it takes not decades, centuries of civilization. Same with the Muslim community. It took, obviously the Prophet was the miracle of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but even for the civilizational empire, it took a century. A century plus for the Umayyads to reach what they reached, and then the Abbasids, right? So people talking about establishing Islamic superpower, I mean, how? It's all I'm saying. So in the meantime, there's a massacre taking place. So what I'm worried about is as follows. There's 10 of us in a room, right? And all 10 of us, if we all start talking about, this imaginary superpower, whatnot, and there's our children that need to be fed, right? There's bills that need to be paid. There's actual stuff that needs to be done. If all of us start talking about some ideal and utopia that we're daydreaming about, and our kids are going hungry, that's a problem.
Absolutely.
It's a massive problem.
I agree.
Now, if one or two of us on the side, part-time, while the rest of us are taking care, that's the ideal. So this is my point. And I've said this multiple times. I am not against it. And those that are qualified and those that have vision and foresight, they should be planning. And they should be charting the course forward in a reasonable manner. But also, while you guys are doing that, don't take me as the enemy by pointing out that you're going to have some steps you're going to have to do. And don't be angry at me when I say, hey guys, the kids need to be fed. The bombing needs to stop. The children of Gaza need to be taken care of. When I point that out, don't get angry at me that, hey, we don't have a caliphate. I'm sorry. Okay. While you guys daydream, I need to take care of the kids here, right? So this is where my criticism has been. It is not against the idea. It is against the fact that I think you guys are jumping 20 steps ahead. when there's so much to do and you haven't explained to me how we're going to get from here to there. And I stand by what I say. Prove me wrong without bloodshed and backlash on me and my family.
I agree. First thing I want to say, I assume it's like not a serious thing, but you keep saying you guys as if like I'm a part of any group. I'm not.
I didn't mean.
Yeah, like, I know. I understand. Okay. I understand. I just want to point out for everyone watching at home. You know,
I didn't mean.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay.
No worries. So, and
it's like, I'm always involved with, back and forth with people and whatnot. And recently I had another podcast with Dr. Hatem Al-Hajj. And so, just for the record, by the way, I mean, after the podcast, I get messages from all over the world.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, those that obviously reach out to me through third parties are very positive. People that have never reached out before, they're like, and generally the more mature and seasoned preachers and du'at and scholars. And obviously I get a lot of flack and criticism as well. And it is what it is. But it's interesting that the conversation starts, and I'm happy about that. I hope, inshallah, even if I'm incorrect in some things, I hope that the conversation is provoked such that you're thinking about other factors, and it's not just simplistic waving a flag and shouting slogans is not going to bring about an actual change.
I agree 100%. And that's why I respect that you're willing to have these discussions, and two, you have some kind of some kind of plan to back the idea. I think it's silly, and I think it's unrealistic, and I think it's actually un-Islamic to say this is what we want. And like, that's it.
And that's exactly. And when I point out you're not going to get there immediately, I get a lot of flack and criticism as if I'm opposed to the ideal. No, you can't get to the ideal without taking care of modern reality. That's all I'm saying.
I agree.
And until you get there, there's so much going on that needs to be taken care of.
I agree 100%. So with everything I've heard, I kind of have like a general idea of what I feel the middle ground could be, or where discourse could happen, and that is so we understand what the ideal is, the caliphate system, some place where in Muslim majority land where Muslims can implement their own laws and untouched by other superpowers. That seems like something that, one, like many other superpowers, takes an extremely long time with an extremely specific amount of planning, step by step, to bring about that reality. And it's not something that's going to happen yesterday or tomorrow. It's going to take some time. So that seems to require a level of strategizing and planning from a united ummah with a united front across the globe. And I'm speaking in ideals here, so forgive me, because we need a plan for this, for unification as well. But if we somehow got majority of Muslims across the globe on the same page, that this is what we want to bring about, and these are the steps we're going to do it. Correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like there are a lot of Muslims in the world that need da'wah, like proper da'wah, to teach them what Islam is and how it's done. It's not just a bunch of like rituals. It's not just praying and fasting and like you said, the length of the beard and trousers and so on and so forth. It is a lot more profound and a lot more practical and pragmatic than that. And it's because we live in a real practical, pragmatic society, in a world where Allah has decreed things to work in a certain way, and you don't just sometimes you can't just pray and then sit back and hope. You have to take practical steps that make sense. So that is kind of my unscholarly, like below layman level understanding the situation.
I mean, I don't disagree with what you're saying. I just again point out, how are you going to get the majority of the world to unite about anything, Muslim world, when they're not united even amongst themselves, politically, ethnically? Which country are you from, ethnically?
Palestine.
Okay. May Allah make it easy for you. I don't want to talk about Palestine. If you had said like Egypt or Pakistan or Jordan, I don't want to talk about.
We can say Jordan. My family lives there. So
okay.
Let's take that.
Okay. So Jordan, you yourself know the qabilas of Jordan and the animosities between them. You yourself know. I don't want to be too explicit here, between Fulan and Fulan, and you know this. Okay, they're Jordanian. The average Pakistani is completely clueless about the internal dynamics, but you know the amount of pride that each section has. They can't even unite amongst themselves. I know as a Pakistani, between people in Lahore and people in Karachi and people in this background and that background, and the Baloch this and the Sindhis that and the Muhajirs this. So we can't even unite ethnically, which is actually the division that Islam explicitly says is haram to be disunited on. Now you bring in politics, and you bring in sectarianism, and you bring in, and you're telling me what if we were to unite about a caliphate? So I'm just saying,
it doesn't
this
seem
is
realistic.
Just kalam fadhi. It sounds good, but come on, it's just a slogan.
It sounds a lot like what people might have said at the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You know, like, oh, this guy, he's one man carrying this mission.
He's a prophet. That's the big difference.
Yeah.
You can't, this apples and oranges. Allah has helped him.
Yeah.
And he is Rasulullah, Khatam al-Anbiya wa Mursaleen, Sayyidul. You can't make, there's no qiyas to be made. What the Prophet did in 23 years, no human being ever could do.
Yeah, I agree 100% because he solidified the foundation of Islam brought to the world. I agree 100%. But what I will add, if you look at like Mus'ab ibn Umair radiallahu anhu, when he went to Medina, he was the one who used Islam to bring the tribes together.
Doing what? Da'wah.
I agree 100%.
Arts, spirituality.
Yeah.
That's what I'm telling everybody to do. What's stopping you? Go ahead.
Yeah. So
preach, convert.
What I'm saying is we need a united front to bring this proper da'wah, this proper understanding of leave behind your nationality or ethnicity. I know
that's
it sounds
exactly
crazy.
what I and everybody else is. All of our preaching is about fortifying people's imans, making them stronger and closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But we have so much to do.
Yeah.
So there's what percentage of Muslims actually pray 5 times a day?
Allahu a'lam.
What percentage around us is non-Muslim? So we literally have light years before we're talking about some critical mass to get to that. You see what I'm saying?
I agree.
So Bismillah, Ardullahi wasi'a, the whole world is open for you. There's lots of preaching and teaching to be done. That's what I'm saying. So when you're on a boat and a person's drowning, and you're like, well, there's no point bringing him on the boat because we don't have a hospital, we don't have bro, he's drowning. Get him on, and we'll deal with stage after that. This is my point, is that we have priorities right now. And so, yes, a small percentage of our intellectuals need to come in a room every once in a while and have a plan and a vision, and I will support them. And I've attended conferences where that has been the main topic, and my heart is with them. But for everyone, there's like 99% that just need to be told, hey guys, pray Fajr, please. You know, they need to be told to change their lives and be more ethical, come closer to Allah, fear the day of judgment. And I'm just doing that the bulk of my time.
I see. Do you feel like it would not be beneficial to also add in what Islam is meant to bring about in the world? Like what the kind of what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam established, and like even like the golden age of Islam that came after.
What is the goal of Islam?
The golden age of Islam?
What is the goal of Islam?
The goal of Islam is to make the deen of Allah superior on earth, to be believed in the hearts of people and implemented in the world, in society, and for us to govern ourselves.
That's a valid point to say. I'm not going to disagree.
What would you say the goal is?
The goal of Islam is to achieve Allah's pleasure. فَمَنْ زُحْزِحَ عَنِ النَّارِ وَأُدْخِلَ الْجَنَّةَ فَقَدْ فَازَ. The real fawz, ذَلِكَ الْفَوْزُ الْعَظِيمُ. The goal of Islam is the ridha of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is the goal of Islam, right? And that goal, in and of itself, is independent of politics.
It's independent of politics?
It is.
So if we implement the legislation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala
in your personal life.
Oh no, I mean the goal should be to implement
Islam. Ideally, it's good to have Islamic politics, without a doubt.
Would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be pleased with us for implementing it? Would he be displeased with us if we could but don't?
Yes, I agree with that too. Okay. But we can't right now.
Yes.
Okay. So when we can't, are we made haram from Jannah? Astaghfirullah. Exactly. So the goal is always there. And the goal is for the Uyghurs, as it is for us, as it is for people in Palestine, as it is for people in Pakistan, and in Morocco, and in Tunisia, and in Timbuktu, everywhere. That goal is accessible. And that is the ultimate goal of Islam. Right? قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا. تَزْكِيَةُ النَّفْس. Right? To purify yourself. Now, the ideal situation, yes, is that purification is manifested at a worldly level in a worldly polity. I'm not denying this, at least, right? But that polity is not the ultimate goal, because you can have that polity, you can have that system, and individually still fail.
I see. Okay.
Do you understand what I'm saying here?
You're speaking on an individual level.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. So for every individual, their goal is to get the Jannah, where they live in Dar al-Islam.
Yes.
Okay. 100%. Now, Islam as a
is meant to get to that goal.
I see. Okay. So when we look at the fara'id, the fard al-kifaya, I remember you mentioned in a lecture you gave about the caliphate, that establishing the caliphate is not one of the top obligations
Did you listen to my recent lecture with Dr. Hatem Al-Hajj? This was like 2 weeks ago.
I listened, I believe, to the first hour.
Okay, so we can go. I mean, he went over. He had an even more a different understanding. It's all we all are different levels here in this regard. No problem, inshallah. It is definitely something that Islam would aim to achieve, because you cannot have many of the hudud and many of the laws of Islam established except within the political framework. Let's be factual. I'm not making a judgment call here. Let's look at all the strands of Islam that are currently these activist strands, right? Name whichever one of them you want, whether you're the Sufis or the Salafis or the Ikhwanis or the Jamaatis or the Tablighis, or the Hizb ut-Tahrir. Name whichever ones you want, right? None of them, other than Hizb ut-Tahrir, with respect, has made the Khilafa number one.
Yeah.
None of them.
I see.
I'm just being factual. Even the Brotherhood and Jamaat Islami, which were founded in the 30s and 40s, trying to revive the Khilafa, have become localized and generic to their own countries to Islamify them. And we've seen what they've done, which is not that much with respect to them.
Yeah.
Right? You understand what I'm saying here?
Yeah.
And as for the Sufis, and as for the Deobandis, and as for the Tablighis, and as for the Salafis, and as for... they by and large are just like getting involved with their personal ibadah, and just by and large quietist or apolitical or whatnot. You understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So the vast majority of Muslims are not actively engaging with the political system, right, to bring about a world order based upon Islam.
Yeah.
Do you agree with me, factually speaking?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Now, what Hizb ut-Tahrir and others are saying is that they are all misled. What I am saying, no.
Yeah.
There's good in all of them.
Yeah.
And theologically, they all have the potential to enter Jannah.
Yeah.
And it is good that some people are involved in politics, and others are involved in tasfiyah and tarbiyah, and others are involved in fiqh and aqidah. I'm actually being mature about it.
Yeah.
And I'm saying fi kullin khair.
Yeah.
I'm not saying Hizb ut-Tahrir are mubtadi' because of this one issue. You understand? Yeah. I disagree with some other stances that they might have. But in this one issue, if they do their job and they don't consider the others to be their opponents.
Yeah.
They're like, okay, the Tablighis, I mean, I'm not a Tablighi. I don't join them, but they're good people. In the end of the day, they're like, innocent, good people, and may Allah bless them. And they're not evil.
Yeah.
They're not my enemies.
Yeah.
I don't have to go and lambast them because they misunderstood some simplistic things. I used to be a Salafi, and my critics say I'm anti-Salafi. Wallahi, no, I don't think I'm anti. I just feel they have some mistakes, but I'm a little bit more explicit with their mistakes because I have the right, because I've been through it. Yeah. Not because I think the Sufis are any less or the Tablighis, but, and I say this very bluntly, all of these religious movements have achieved a level of salvation that inshallah will cause them to enter Jannah.
Yeah.
And their mistakes will be forgiven in light of their good if they live up to their own ideals.
Yeah.
If a Tablighi is really a Tablighi, right? If a Deobandi is really a Deobandi, if a Sufi is really a Sufi, if a Salafi is really a Salafi, and they live up to what their mashayikh say, which is praying 5 times a day, following their version of fiqh and aqidah, and even through all their differences. I don't carry a card anymore to one of these membership clubs. Yeah. I believe in the religion of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. That is the card I want to carry.
Yeah.
That's the only card I'm interested in, right? Yeah. I don't want exclusive club memberships anymore. Yeah. I used to be like that, right? So I'm actually backtracking. I'm actually lowering the bar of salvation, not raising it up, because each of these groups wants a super high bar, right? And I'm saying, no, the religion of the Prophet ﷺ is bigger than your exclusive memberships. Yeah. You might think only you are going to Jannah. That's your mistake. And I think you're mistaken. But I'm not going to say you're going to Jahannam because of that mistake of yours. You understand what I'm saying here?
Yes.
You might think you're the only group going to Jannah. Yeah. That's your, pietistic arrogance. It's not a kibr arrogance. It's like your sense of we are better than everybody else. Yeah. But no, you're not. And all the other groups are also good. So when Hizb ut-Tahrir and others say that, and again, I'm just being factual. I'm not being harsh or demeaning here. When they say that, all these other groups are theologically misguided, that is a massive, massive claim to make.
Yes.
And I point out factually, they are the only group that are making this the number one priority.
Yeah.
And I think there's nothing wrong with them to do so. Yeah. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
The irony, go do it. But allow the other groups to find their own personal relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in their ways.
Yeah.
And I don't have a problem with that. And if we all did our job, maybe, just maybe, in that diversity, we might actually find some unity. But the problem comes, كل حزب بما لديهم فرحون. Every group thinks, the Salafis think, if you don't follow my particular aqidah, you're a mubtadi', right? The Sufi thinks, if you don't have my tasfiyah, my tariqah right now, the Deobandi thinks your fiqh is not quite exactly, the Tablighi thinks you're not doing da'wah the way I want to do. If we all understood, look, Allah created us all differently. And as long as we have the red lines, and I talked about what these red lines are, and they're very clear. La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. Those are the red lines, man. That's it. Really, it's the kalima, it's the Quran. It's like, the sha'air of the Islam, the 5 pillars of Islam. These are the fundamentals where we all agree upon. If we can understand this point, then if we can just stop the animosity between us and say, you know what? It's good the Tablighis are going out and doing da'wah. It's good the Salafis remind us there is something called aqidah. It's important, It's good the Deobandis talked about structured fiqh, because yes, it's nice to have structured fiqh. It's good. But just understand, the other groups are not your enemies, and they're not evil, and they're not called us to shaitan, and they're not all going to Jahannam just because they disagree with your particular understanding of Islam. If we could get to that level, I really think the ummah would actually be at a far bigger place, better place.
I very, very, very much agree with that 100%. And I think, unfortunately, every single group has their flaws, especially the ones that ostracize the other ones. And as you mentioned, say that, you guys are misguided and a'udhu billah, you're going to be in the hellfire. May Allah
what I say, and I said this in Canada, if you listen to my lecture I gave in Mississauga and ISNA, what I say, find the moderates of every group. Every group has moderates and fanatics. Find the moderates. The moderates who like, you know what, I like my way, and I understand you have a different way. Yeah. You will always find in the Sufis, in the Salafis, in the Ikhwan, in the HT, you will always find those who say, I really like my methodology. It's what makes sense to me. But I understand that your methodology, it's valid for you and good for you. Yeah. Those are the ones. Do not go to those that literally preach my narrow way or the highway, because that is where sectarianism and firqa, and that's not the goals of the religion of Islam.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And correct me if I'm wrong, it seems to be that they are actually kind of opposed to some of the ahkam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by doing this, that they're ostracizing certain groups of Muslims by kind of saying, we are the not chosen ones, but we are on the right way in what we say.
That's literally what they're saying. Yeah. Like, we are the God's chosen people, and Allah criticized those who said that. No. Yeah. Our Prophet ﷺ said, the rights of a Muslim upon another Muslim are you help him when he needs to be helped. You return the salam to him. So he literally called the rights of a Muslim, haqqul muslimi ala al-muslim. Nobody has the right to say, okay, if you don't follow my group, then I'm not going to give you the rights of a Muslim to another Muslim. Anybody who does so has disobeyed Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If you are a Muslim, then I have a right over you, you have a right over me by the testimony or by the text of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Simple as that.
Yeah, amazing. Jazakallah khair. So we're running low on time, so I do want to go towards unity because, as we discussed, pragmatism, being pragmatic and being practical, I do want to ask you for some practical steps. We started our organization, the Daily Muslim, because we want to bring Muslims together, both like the viewers at home and the speakers and the scholars and anyone who we can, inshallah. So how does unification actually happen, and what does that look like? What are the practical steps towards bringing down these unnecessary barriers and initiating these conversations, which you, may Allah bless you, are very, very open to having, and I respect that very much.
Unity begins with your own efforts in your own community and your own masjid. Unity begins, you have a podcast here, bring people of different groups and different backgrounds and literally just have it out. Unity begins by listening to people outside of your own narrow interpretation and understanding. Oh my God, they're actually Muslims. They say Bismillah before they eat. They pray facing the Qibla. Like, you'll be shocked. Like, oh my God, they actually read the Quran. Yes, unity begins by these small steps. And when you do these small steps, you will actually begin to see the fruits of that unity. Unity begins by understanding that just because somebody disagrees with your interpretation of Islam, he's not disagreeing with Islam.
I see. Absolutely. Do you think Muslims should have a united front when it comes to like media, for example?
I mean, of course they should, but then again, sometimes a little bit of diversity is good as well. Yeah. Because we need different tactics. Does that make sense? Yeah. We need different methodologies to do, and Allah knows which one is going to be successful. Yeah. So yes, there should be Muslim media out there. At the same time, what tactic to be done? And yeah, sometimes people have tactics that I don't necessarily agree with, but some good will come out of them, right? And our Prophet ﷺ, this is hadith, our Prophet ﷺ said, sometimes Allah helps the religion with a kafir or with a fajr, an evil person. This is a hadith. Inna Allah la yu'ayyidu hada din bi rajul al-fajr, and one riwayah rajul al-kafir, right? And just because he's a fajr and he helps the religion, that doesn't justify his fujur. Fujur means his sin and evil, right? And we need to be wise enough to understand this. Once again, we have a very, kindergarten level of this. Now, there are non-Muslims who are supporting the Palestinian cause.
Yeah, that's true.
Now, should we not take their help? It's common sense. Yeah. What if somebody says, "Oh, but he's a kafir"? What would you say to that?
So what?
So what? What if somebody says, "Oh, but he's an LGBT supporter"?
I don't see the correlation on how that is a problem, because if they want to speak out against injustice,
so we're not allying with them for LGBT. We're allying with them for Palestine, right? Yeah. That's exactly the point. We need to reach that level of maturity. There are actors and actresses. Somebody told me, I don't know, but it's some Arab actress or something, obviously not dressed properly, whatever, but apparently she wore a Palestinian dress or something, some famous thing or something like that. Obviously she's not dressed appropriately, but she's doing whatever her part is. Now, am I going to justify that? Of course not. It's not allowed to show your skin. You know what I'm saying? But she might be doing something that maybe, I mean, let's not be judge, jury, and executioner. Yeah. Haram and halal is halal. But Allah is the judge of Jannah and Jahannam. And never forget, Allah forgave a prostitute for feeding a dog a morsel of water. Something stirred in that girl's heart who did that to that dog. What if, I don't know this person, but what if this Muslim lady, she feels a sense for Palestine? And that was her da'wah. And I'm not justifying, please, because I have to be super careful. My critics jump at every opportunity they can. I'm just saying, can we not criticize overall that, hey, we don't want skin to be shown, and then say, but you know what? If somebody did something in their realm that they wouldn't do otherwise, may Allah bless them for that. Can we not get to this level of nuance without me being canceled for being generic? Do you understand what I'm saying? Right? Yeah. This is unfortunately what we do, is that we have trigger happy youth that just want to kick everybody off. And it does become a nuisance. It becomes a irritation, not just because, of course, it's painful because I'm a human being, but also because it causes unnecessary online chatter and drama, where people's energy and bandwidth is diverted to what is more important to that which is less important.
Yeah, I see. I think personally what would help is if you take the mature moderates from different groups, these extreme kids online who might be commenting these things. I'm sure they look up to certain shaykh, and I'm hoping that certain shaykh that they look up to are mature and able to have these discussions. I think bringing those mature people, those moderates, all together to have these discussions on certain things, publicly as well, would do great amounts for the Muslims at home, being able to see, I look up to Yasir Qadhi, he's sitting with so-and-so, he's sitting with these people, and they're having a civil discussion. That's actually very enlightening. And now they would be fed those different...
Well, if you look at the last few years, that's really what I've been doing with a lot of people of background, because it doesn't matter to me which card you're carrying within the mainstream movements of Islam. Sure, there are lines we draw, and people that are astaghfirullah believing in a prophet after the process. I mean, that's like we draw lines there, And yes, there are things I don't like at all. If you're gonna say bad things about the Sahaba, I don't want to pray behind you, and I've said this publicly, So there's levels of stuff that we do in this regard, no question about it. But I say very clearly, I mention all of these groups. I don't have a problem whenever these groups that you follow in these mainstream Sunni movements. It doesn't bother me in the slightest. And you have the potential to reach Firdaus al-A'la. That is the real goal. So if any of these people can reach Firdaus al-A'la, how can I be angry at you? How can I take you as an enemy when, inshallah, I hope we're in Jannah together forever? Doesn't make any sense. We're fighting on earth when in reality, my goal and your goal is exactly the same place, and inshallah we'll be there, right? So why make this earth hell when inshallah we're going to be there forever? So I'm not that type of person where I make these types of petty things my main focus. There's no one path for Muslim revival. I say to the youth that ask me their advice, I say, do the best that you can in your dunya while you're visibly Muslim in your deen. Like, do the best that you can in whatever you're doing, whether it's in your company, you're in your job, whether it's in your worksmanship, whether it's in your founding your CEO. Be the best you can be, and also be visibly Muslim. That's it. That is the best da'wah you can do, for the people to see that you are a proud Muslim and you are clearly identifying with Islam, and at the same time you're at the top of your field and whatever you're doing. That's all. Now, we don't need everybody to go and become full-time da'wah and shuyukh and activists, because Islam was never like that. We do need everybody to be visibly Muslim, to be proud to be Muslim. That's what we need. So you do you, as the saying goes, right? That's what you guys are. I'll say you do you, but you do you while you're a Muslim. And if you do that, inshallah, Canada, America, Australia, England, and all these Western countries, inshallah, we will then be the catalyst that these countries need.
Inshallah, ya Rab. Inshallah. Do you have any final message for anyone watching?
My message is simple, that is that what is required of you is very simple, dear Muslim, and that is you worship Allah with your utmost love and devotion, and you try to bring as much barakah and khair to the people around you as you can. That is all that Allah requires of you. And if you make that your lifelong mission and goal, you can and you will enter Firdaus al-A'la. Firdaus al-A'la is achievable. It is. And that is in your own heart, with your own relationship with Allah. You max out, and then in your sphere of influence. That's all that's required. You're not allowed to change you're not required to change the entire globe. It's great if you could. You're not required. You are required to change your sphere of influence. You are required to influence the people around you.
Yeah.
So you do the best you can do. And if you do that, and everybody does that, guess what? That's how change actually begins. Yeah. And if we all did that, then perhaps, inshallah, we will see that global change we're talking about.
Inshallah, ya Rab. Barakallah feekum. Allah bless you immensely. And inshallah, hopefully we can do this again soon.
Inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. Inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum.
فيا ذلي ويا خجلي إذا ما قال لي ربي أما استحييته تعصيني ولا تخشى من العتب وتخفي الذنب عن خلقي وتأبى في الهوى قربي فتب مما جنيت عسى تعود إلى رضا